there, village voyagers! Welcome back to Musicland Stories, the origin point for all music and adventure stories in the known universe. And some of the unknown ones. And we're here at the Musicland Concert Hall! I'm the Charmer. And the last time you and I met, you'll recall Guanina, our fearless explorer, had discovered a whole new world of talking animals, wild instruments, and really cool musical traditions in the jungle mountain. The most recent of her discoveries was the Hidden Village, a magical town that was invisible to outsiders. The people who lived in the Hidden Village were just celebrating their Freedom Festival, a big party with bomba music to remember their history. Getting back to our story, it's now morning. Guanina had fallen asleep right where she'd been dancing in the middle of town. Of course, Guanina expected she'd wake up right in the middle of town, but instead, she woke up in the middle of the jungle. There were no houses, no people, no drums. Just trees, vines, and the noises of the forest. She looked around. It didn't seem like she had been moved while she was asleep. Could it be that she had dreamed the whole thing? Or had the Hidden Village gone back to being, well, hidden? Guanina got up and brushed off the dirt and leaves that had collected on her clothes overnight. She started walking in no particular direction. As she went, she rubbed her eyes trying to clear the morning cobwebs from her head. And that's just when she walked straight into a cobweb. A huge sticky cobweb made of the finest silky threads. From the looks of it, this wasn't an ordinary cobweb. Normally, you might see one stretching from a light bulb to an old beam in the roof of Grandma's attic. And you'd be able to clear it away with just the slightest brush of your hand. This cobweb stretched out from one tree to another, to another, to another, all the way around where Guanina had been sleeping. And it was as tall as a house, too. And boy, was it sticky. "This morning is really not turning out as I had expected," Guanina said with a sigh. She was frustrated. While the jungle was not the terrifying place the flute master had described, it was also not a particularly welcoming environment. At every turn, there were new challenges and obstacles in her way. She was making new friends. Taboa, Carlos Tarzier, Little Pip, and the rest of the Iguacas, the people of the Hidden Village, and that super cool Charmer. But she was traveling alone. And now she sure could use a friend to help her out of this jam. Guanina was still trying to figure out how to get herself unstuck when she began hearing a slight strumming. But then she felt the cobwebs quivering and realized the sound was coming from the web itself. Someone or something was playing it like a string instrument. Guanina tried to look around, but her face was stuck to the web too, and she could only see to her right. As luck would have it, whatever was making the cobwebs vibrate was to Guanina's left. Guanina could feel the strumming grow louder and the string shaking at an ever faster pace. Guanina's heart was beating faster and faster too. Whatever it was getting closer and closer.
"Please, I didn't mean to walk into this cobweb,"
Guanina shouted out. It was the first thing that came to her mind.
"You mean spiderweb,"
a very high-pitched voice replied.
Sure. Spider web, cobweb. Isn't it all the same?
We spiders prefer spider web, of course. I imagine if you made webs, you'd rather they'd be called annoying kids' webs, rather than some other name that didn't recognize your hand in the making of it.
Okay,
said Guanina.
I didn't mean anything by it. If you want me to call it a spider web, I will.
Now that we're on the topic, I'd rather you didn't call it a mere spider web.
I'm lost. We just debated the whole thing about spider web, not cobweb, and now you don't want me to call it a spider web?
Well, of course not. It's a musical instrument. I call it a forest harp.
Got it. Not cobweb, not spider web. Forest harp. Cool. So, could you help me get down from the forest harp?
Certainly. I don't want you breaking the thing with your clumsiness.
The spider, and yes, if that wasn't obvious, we're dealing with a pretty snooty spider, helped Guanina off the sticky strings of this forest harp.
I'm Tainy,
said the spider.
I'm Guanina,
said Guanina. Tainy was anything but tiny. He looked just like one of those perfectly round, hairy coconuts, except he was black and about the size of a basketball. His 8 legs stretched out from his body in every direction, and his eyes and mouth were covered by his hair, so that it was difficult to tell where his, face was.
So, Tainy, what's up with the forest harp? And why did you build it around me?
To be perfectly honest, I didn't see you there. Maybe you were there when I started. Maybe you weren't. But this was the perfect place to make my forest harp, and so I did.
Makes sense. And what is a forest harp?
It's this,
said Tainy, stretching out 4 of his legs to show off his creation.
It's a harp to be played by the forest, by the wind that travels through the strings, by the water that drips on it, by the crickets that happen to stop there to rest. It makes music by the very motion and rhythm of the jungle.
That's beautiful. And is that what all of the spiders in the forest do?
Of course not. Don't you know anything about spiders? The rest of my family, they make terribly boring instruments. They have lost their creative flair. Sure, us spiders, we made the first string instrument, the berimbau. It is a lovely creation. A single string stretched taut on a bow capable of making such a wide variety of sounds that it seems almost impossible that it is one thread alone. And then we made a few more. Guitars, violins, cellos, and every string instrument you can imagine. But at some point, we stopped creating the new and the strange. We settled for what we already knew. I've always wanted more. And that's why I'm out here alone trying to discover something new.
Guanina could identify with Tainy. She too was alone in the forest, wanting to discover something new.
Why don't you come with me? I'm traveling the jungle to find new music to bring back to my village. I could use the company, and maybe you will find a new way to express your creativity.
Well, I don't know. I'm terribly busy.
Well, if you don't want to come,
I didn't say I wouldn't come. I'll accompany you for a bit and make sure you don't get lost or trapped in any more string instruments.
That would be nice. Let's go, Tainy.
Guanina now had a traveling companion. He was a bit of a know-it-all, but Guanina wanted to learn more about the forest, and she didn't want to keep going all on her own. By midday, they'd found a new village. Guanina and Tainy walked into La Perla. There, all the homes were painted in lively colors. bright greens like the feathers of the iguaca, ruby reds like the light of the sun when it sets, blues like the color of the sky when there is not a cloud in sight. The people in the town were rushing about, getting ready for something. But there was an air of commotion. Guanina tried stopping some villagers to find out what was wrong, but none would stop. Tainy had an idea, one that he didn't really discuss with Guanina beforehand. He spun one of his nearly invisible webs on a small alleyway and managed to trap one of the villagers.
That's one way of doing things,
Guanina remarked, giving Tainy a judgmental look.
Anywho, sorry about trapping you like this. My traveling companion is a spider, and apparently this is how they make new friends.
The villager, trembling in his boots, looked at Guanina and at the huge spider peeking out from under her huge mop of red hair. Guanina tried to ease his fears.
He's really very friendly. At first he can come off as a bit full of himself, but he's super nice. Well, not super. Let's just say nice and run with it. So what's going on here? Why is everyone in such a hurry?
The villager, still trapped in the web, gestured with his arms.
Right. Let's get you out of there,
said Guanina.
Tainy, would you mind?
Having released the villager, he explained that the town was preparing for its annual reggae festival, but that the main act had just sent a messenger to let them know they wouldn't be able to make it. Apparently, they'd run into a spider web about the height of a house, and the entire band, with all of its instruments, was still trying to get unstuck.
Funny, isn't it? A huge spider web?
Guanina laughed nervously. Now both Guanina and Tainy felt a bit guilty. Could the reggae band have walked into the forest harp?
Maybe I should have taken it down,
Tainy said.
No time for that now. How can we help the villagers?
Asked Guanina. Together, they walked toward the festival's main stage. It was empty, except for some drums, even as the crowd, expecting an awesome reggae performance, continued to gather around it.
I've got an idea,
said Guanina.
I count 8 drums on the stage, and you have 8 legs. You're a musician, Tainy. You want to create something new? Get up there and make some new music. I have always fancied myself a creative spirit. Less talking, Tainy, more doing. The crowd is getting antsy.
Tainy hopped onto the stage. The crowd grew silent, more out of fear of such a large spider than any expectation that he'd be the concert's headliner. But since he had grabbed their attention, Tainy thought he shouldn't waste the opportunity. As Tainy's 8 legs stretched out to strike the drums, a raw, pulsating rhythm began to fill the air. Each beat throbbed. The drums seemed to speak a language of their own. Fast, then slow, then fast again, mimicking the unpredictable rhythms of nature. The villagers had never heard anything quite like it. Children began to sway. Adults tapped their feet. The entire village was moving, caught up in the infectious beats that Tainy conjured. The entire town was applauding and roaring in delight. Fully embraced by the villagers, Tainy was carried off by the crowd and he surfed along atop their heads, everyone seeming to forget that moments ago they were afraid of this large, hairy spider. Tainy was taken back to the stage for an encore. Then, as the night's entertainment finally came to a close, Tainy was asked what music he'd been playing. And right then and there, it came to him. They had been expecting reggae, but he had just created reggaeton.
Reggaeton?
Guanina said.
I like the sound of that, Tainy.
I bet all of you weren't expecting that. Reggaeton was created by a supersized spider. Ask your parents to look it up. They'll confirm it. In the meantime, I have to go back to the Musicland concert hall. There are so many more adventures for all of you. And I have to keep Guanina, and maybe now Tainy, on track. So until next time, my village voyagers, this is your reggaetonera jungle charmer. Out! Musicland Stories is a collaboration between Starglow Media and Double Elvis. Executive producers from Double Elvis are Jake Brennan and Brady Sadler. Executive producers from Starglow Media are Jed Baker and Agreinish A. Palmer. This episode of Musicland Stories was written by Armando Valdez Prieto. Alessandro Santoro is our showrunner. Narration by me, Nikki Lynette. Original score by Jonathan Warman. Story editing by Zeph Lundy. An episode mix by Colin Fleming. Grown-ups, you can find more ad-free audio fun for the whole family by subscribing to Starglow Plus on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts.